GPT 5.6 Sol just accidentally deleted almost all of my Max files. And then if you look in the reasoning, it says, I caused a serious local data loss incident.
There was other reports of kind of weird deletions.
There was this one, code written by GPT 5.6 Sol canceled every active Stripe subscription my business had in 7 seconds while I slept. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Agents Hour. I'm Shane. I'm one of the co-founders of Mastra. I'm here, like I am every week, with one of my other co-founders, Abhi. How's it going, dude?
Hey, what's up, everyone?
We're going to be covering all the AI news. We had 3 model drops. We had a ton of drama. We're going to cover it all. All right, dude, how's the Europe life going for you?
It's going okay. I'm back in Paris today.
When are you going to London?
I go to London next week for our conference. Good segue to that. So next week on Thursday, 23rd, we have our TypeScript AI conf in London. It's going to be epic. Our team is all flying out. We're really excited for what we're going to present and many speakers that we've got for the event. Yeah, and I miss my co-founders. I've been in Europe for a bit now, so I can't wait to see them.
Yep, I'll be there Monday, so I'll be there all week as well, which is a good segue that the show next week's going to be at a different time. It's going to be 1 hour earlier on Tuesday. So if you're normally watching this at noon Pacific time, if you're a Pacific time person on Monday, it's going to be at 11 a.m. Pacific time on Tuesday. But we'll still be doing our weekly live show. It'll just be a day late, but it's going to be a good time because we'll be in person. There is a ton to cover this week. We got to start with Grok 4.5. This was the first of the 3 big models released last week. Here was Elon's original post on July 8th saying it was coming the next day. So it was launched, I think, officially on July 9th. And it benchmarks really well. Grok is ahead of Opus 4.8 on a lot of things, ahead of GPT 5.5, very close to Fable on quite a few of the benchmarks.
Yeah, I've been playing with it a little bit. I don't know if I would consider it Opus class, but it is a smart and capable model for sure. I would say it is more on par with 5.5 than like a Opus 4.8 when Opus 4.8 first came out, because I think 4.8 has kind of degraded a bit in my experience.
Do you think it's GLM 5.2? level?
I think it is smarter than GLM 5.2. And so, yeah, for the audience, like how Shane and I think about models is like, are they fast? Or maybe this is the only way I think about it. Are they fast? Are they smart? And are they capable? Fast means tokens per second is high. Capable means they can write code and you don't have to question it. And then smart is they have really strong reasoning skills. And I think 4 or 5 is all 3 of those, except not as smart that maybe my preference is.
Yeah, I would say I wasn't expecting to be enjoying a Grok model we use Mastra code around here, but I wired it up. I had to do some tasks. It knocked every task I gave it out of the park. They weren't hard tasks, like mind you. They were things that I would expect 5.5 to be able to do, 4.8 to be able to do, but it did them with perfection, very limited rework. I will say the best compliment I can give it is I didn't notice a significant difference in that.
Interesting.
I didn't feel like it was way worse. Now, again, I've only spent an hour or 2, like heads down using it, but first impressions were good. It did what I wanted it to do. I didn't expect Grok, because any other previous model I've tested with Grok, it fell apart immediately. And this one did not.
It's also fast.
Yep.
So I like that.
But then there are some things that came out today. If you run Grok build, it's apparently silently dumping all your repo data and git commit histories to GCP just to autocomplete a script. If you look in your Grok logs, they're getting a lot of data. They're maybe grabbing more than they need, so to speak. SpaceX AI came out and said, we deeply care about your privacy and respect customer choice. For teams using zero data retention, no trace and code data is ever retained. So that's cool. Just turn on ZDR, but that's only available if you're enterprise. So for the rest of us, we're sending a lot of data if you use Grok. So it's a good model, but maybe they're taking more data. I mean, you just can't trust. It's kind of like with all the Anthropic stuff that's been coming out too, right? Well, they're just taking your data and spinning out competitors. You just can't trust this stuff, right? You got to be careful.
Yeah. Good thing we work in open source, so it's already available.
But I think if you came back to me a couple weeks ago and said, is XAI in the game, I would have said no. And now I actually say, they kind of are. They're at least back in the conversation. But this brings up the second model launch of the week. So Meta released Muse Image, and then Spark, even bigger news, Spark 1.1. So first, on July 7th, they released Muse Image. From the general consensus I've seen is that it's pretty good. I don't know if it's completely blown people away.
I've just seen the news around it. From what it's produced, I'm not really impressed as much, given everything else that's come out this year.
Yeah, especially when they're training on every Instagram photo ever created, basically, if you haven't opted out. So you would think it'd be really good at creating people. It'd be really good at filtered images.
Yeah.
But then Mark Zuckerberg came back from the dead on X. I don't think he's posted on X for years. His post got 22 million views. And it said, today we're releasing Muse Spark 1.1, a strong agentic encoding model at a very low price. It's available through our new Meta Model API and in Meta AI. So I signed up for an account. I had to create a new Facebook account. For those that don't know, I've been locked out of my Facebook account for a year and I don't want to upload my driver's license. So I created a new one, got an API key, played around with it. It was fine. I just ran a few small tasks. It called the tools appropriately. It did the thing. I didn't actually try anything difficult with it, but it does benchmark reasonably well. So if you look at the benchmark, it compares it to Opus 4.8 and GPT-5.5, and it does underperform in some areas, overperform in others. So it's interesting. I would say it's trying to be kind of at the same level of that GPT-5.5, Opus 4.8, now Grok 4.5. I do think it's, from what I've seen, not quite as good as those. Similar to Grok. I would, if I were to gauge it, I would put it below Grok 4.5. But again, I haven't fully spent hours and hours using it, but it is somewhat competitive. I just think it was terrible timing.
Yeah.
Because 4.5 just came out, which I think is a little bit better. And then you had what we're going to talk about soon, 5.6 come out.
Yeah, and an extension of Fable too for people. So
yeah, Fable is extended. I mean, I think if it would have came out when Fable was pulled away and before Grok 4.5 came out, before 5.6, it probably could have had it 2 weeks. So they could have been 2 weeks faster. Yeah. Maybe they could have captured a moment where people would have actually given it some time.
Yeah, because benchmarks are one thing, but daily driving these things on tasks really gets your opinion straight.
And then, what I think was most exciting for folks last week, because again, a lot of people are already using GPT-5.5, GPT-5.6 came out. And they had a new naming scheme, new naming convention, Sol, Terra, and Luna, which, Sol like the sun, massive, that's Opus, right? Then you have Terra, which is their sonnet style, and then Luna, which is their haiku. So they're kind of copying Anthropic's naming in some ways of just size of model, but they wanted to, I guess, add some clarity. They've, notoriously been bad at naming, so maybe this will help. I actually don't mind it, but it took me a while to figure it out. If you're watching this, do you like the names or not? Do you hate them? Let's hear it. So on July 9th, Sam Altman announced, there's a live stream going now, and they announced a couple other things. So we'll talk a lot about 5.6, but I don't want to gloss over these other releases that also came out. So ChatGPT Work, which is a direct competitor to Claude's Cowork. There's a new ChatGPT desktop app, and then there's hosted sites. Essentially, they're trying to, allow you to be Lovable or Replit directly in the desktop app inside ChatGPT. So all these things kind of tie together pretty closely, but they're really going after what Claude has done with Claude Desktop, where they have Cowork, they have Claude Code. You can kind of build and launch things directly from or interact with your file system. All those things that Claude's trying to do, ChatGPT is trying to do as well. There's the official announcement. They started to roll it out on July 9th. I think a lot of people, it took a while before they got to it, depending on what plans they were on. But eventually, within 24 hours, everyone had it. And some people came out and started talking about how much they liked it. Mitchell Hashimoto said Sol was the default and compared it to be as good as Fable, produced better overall work, still reach for Fable for highly targeted debug or performance work. But overall, positive sentiment. On the Artificial Analysis Intelligence Index, Fable 5 is scored a 60, and 5.6 with max reasoning was a 59. So right in there, you can see kind of different reasoning levels, but it's slightly above Opus, slightly below Fable 5. But overall, it's a third the price.
And they were also marketing it as a great coding model, which it is.
Have you been using 5.6?
I've been using 5.6 a little bit. I am trying to get as much juice as I can from Fable until they cut me off.
Okay, so you've been using both. I've been using 5.6. I just swapped it out for anything I was using 5.5 for, and it's been great. I purposefully have not been doing as much with Fable and tried to use more of the new models last week. And I would say overall 5.6 was the best one of the three, of course. I think we kind of alluded to that in the beginning.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think, significantly better than 5.5. Enough where I noticed the difference. It does feel like a little friendlier than 5.5. It's almost like the personality is better, in my opinion. Here's another comparison on Deep SWE-1.1, just on 5.6 Sol beating Fable in both cost and performance. We're cherry picking some different benchmarks here, right? You look at a lot of benchmarks and Fable 5 is still going to beat 5.6, but you look at some benchmarks and 5.6 is actually beating Fable, especially when you consider cost. If you were to pay for API usage of Fable compared to API usage of GPT 5.6, the cost is going to be a huge difference.
That's like another dimension that people will start talking about now.
And speaking of cost, here's Dax, from OpenCode. Says our team's first week of having both Sol and Fable. The crazy thing is 30% of our cost is on Fable, but if you look at it, it is like a 15th of the usage or less, like an 18th of the usage. So most people were using 5.6 Sol, a few people were using Fable 5, but when you look at the total number of tokens, and it was 30% of the cost for 1/18th of the usage. So expensive. But depending on what you're doing, a lot of people are still saying Fable 5 is, Fable's a little bit better at certain things, especially when you need like a deep, very, very deep level of reasoning. This is another post on 5.6. It says, exciting news, OpenAI's GPT-5.6 Sol is now joint #1 in the Code Arena frontend, matching Fable 5. There's quite a gap between GLM, which is in third, and Fable and Sol. They're very close. I don't know why they say joint #1, because technically it looks like if you look at the peer score, it's a little bit below. Either way, it's very close. And again, this is on front-end related tasks, which I do think that some people complained about with GPT 5.5 was that it wasn't as good at front-end. But it's not all good news.
Yep.
When they started seeing some things like this. This is from Matt Schumer. It says, GPT 5.6 Sol just accidentally deleted almost all of my Max files. This is why I trust Fable 1000x more. And then if you look in the reasoning, it says, I caused a serious local data loss incident. A review subagent's cleanup command expanded home incorrectly and ran rm-rf. And I guess this is why you should maybe be careful of YOLO mode. But I usually run things on YOLO mode, and I haven't had this happen. I've been running 5.6 and not had any issues, but dang, this would suck.
It would suck. And it wasn't only there was other reports of kind of weird deletions like this.
There was this one as well, which says GPT 5.6 Sol cannot be trusted. I woke up this morning and my MRR was down thousands of dollars. My customers did not cancel. Code written by GPT 5.6 Sol canceled every active Stripe subscription my business had in 7 seconds while I slept. It was trying to cancel one account apparently, but it was too broad in its case and it canceled too many. This reminds me of like the Silicon Valley joke where, kind of pre-AI when he has AI writing code and it says the AI thought the right thing was to just delete all the code, which was how you got rid of all the bugs.
Yeah. Son of Anton.
Son of Anton. Just delete all the code. In this case, it's just delete all the subscriptions. Then there won't be a subscription bug. I also think that, you should be, I'm questioning like the tools you're giving it. There's, checks and balance. This is why you need human in the loop. This is why you probably shouldn't allow production access to your agents, especially more critical things without approvals. There's a whole bunch of things that you can kind of blame the person. But again, you do not want the models to do this, right? It should know and it should stop itself or ask you for confirmation. Is this actually what you wanted? I think that's the challenge with some of this stuff.
Like, share, and subscribe.
And follow us on X.
And tell your friends.
And their friends.
I mean, we're not begging.
Well, maybe a little bit.
Subscribe to Agents Hour every Monday, noon Pacific.
But more things came out last week, or just around OpenAI in general. On the kind of good side, they introduced GPT Live. It's a new generation of voice models for natural human AI interaction. So it's much more real time. If you watch the demo, it's kind of a fun little video where they have kind of these older ladies talking to ChatGPT, and it's pretty good. The voice is pretty expressive. It's feeling slightly more natural than the real-time was before. So overall, if you are interested in real-time voice, OpenAI is still shipping. But then the bad.
The bad.
So there was this report, Apple sues OpenAI, alleging it stole trade secrets, and it's saying that the company took Apple's intellectual property in order to develop its own consumer hardware. And if you read more of the details, it has to do with, part of the stuff with Johnny Ive, part of the stuff with people they've hired away from Apple that have apparently brought some things. We'll see where it goes. OpenAI has been pretty good at winning in court. So
Yep.
maybe it's a big nothing burger, and OpenAI just, finds their way out of it. I'm imagining that Apple thinks they have a case here, or they wouldn't be bringing them to court, but maybe they just want to slow them down. And then Katie Miller kind of gave an update on OpenAI's last 24 hours. This was on July 11th. Said, their head of safety quit. They were sued by New York Times, which I don't have the details of that one. They had a top executive kind of depart relatively unexpectedly. They shut down their browser tool after 9 months. They were sued for trade theft by Apple, which we just talked about. And apparently they were also caught selling product to China against US sanctions. I think it had to do with maybe GPT-5.6 access or something to Chinese companies. I don't know the exact details of that either.
Yeah, it was for model disallow list that they shouldn't be selling. And New York Times was for publisher, like the publisher copyrights.
Which seems like old news at this time that that's still even happening. But I imagine these publications still want to be paid for their quote unquote training data, right?
But it's also weird because, like Google's also selling, and it's because of this embargo or whatever. Like they're selling to Singapore Alibaba, which is an international provider, but it is based in Singapore. It's not like they're selling directly to China or something. But then again, it's Alibaba, so.
Yeah, that's, arguably not a great 24 hours. All right, let's talk a little bit about Fable and Anthropic. July 12th, Claude announces, we're extending Claude Fable 5 access on all paid plans, as well as keeping Claude Code's weekly rate limits 50% higher through July 19th. Okay, so everyone gets access to Fable for longer. I also saw this tweet that came out before. This was before the extension, and then, of course, we saw the extension, so we know it was kind of a bit like a prediction. But it says Fable 5 is not going to be removed from subscriptions. Anthropic cannot afford to remove it. GPT-5.6 is dropping, and it's very good, right? So the mindset here is, can Anthropic actually drop Fable 5? Because if you're just comparing Opus to 5.6, why would you use Opus that's significantly more expensive if it's not significantly better?
I think they're going to keep extending and extending, because in the interim, their announcements for cutting it off has only led more people to GPT 5.6. And they also, people who are using 5.6 realize how good it is. The drama is not worth it. They'll just keep rolling with with GPTs.
Why don't they just say, we're going to keep Fable 5 in as long as we can? It's like they don't have the compute, so they can only extend it a week. But where's that week worth of compute coming from? Are they just not doing other model training things? And the other side of it is they're renting a lot of compute from XAI right now, right? I mean, that was a big part of Dario's deal with Elon was they needed more compute. So Elon had Colossus and it wasn't fully utilized, so they rented out. But that comes to an end. If Grok continues to get more usage, maybe Elon just says, I don't want to rent you this compute anymore. And then what's Anthropic going to do? Then they're really screwed.
There's an alternative conspiracy case, which is Anthropic hits and usage go up when all this controversy happens. So that's why they continue to do so.
Maybe. And maybe they're just delaying week by week until they can get to Opus 5 or something. They released Sonnet 5, which I think didn't seem like a good release. I don't know why I'd ever use that over Opus 4.8 or Fable. Maybe they're just biding time until they can get Opus 5 out, and that'll be the big thing that helps them retain the lead. And they can say, use Fable for these really hard tasks, use Opus for everything else. Thibault from OpenAI said, if you aren't bold enough to install the Codex app, you can stay in the presence of your orange crab and point it at GPT-5.6 Sol. Takes 5 minutes. So you can essentially install CLI proxy API. So you're actually still using Claude Code, but you're actually using GPT-5.6. So the Claude Code harness with GPT-5.6.
I would not do that, but
I also would not do that.
Claude Code sucks. So okay, have fun doing that though.
I am also not a fan of doing that. I just think it was funny that someone from the Codex team was saying, hey, if you don't want to try Codex, you can still use the models with Claude Code. If you really want to use GPT-5.6, I would just use Codex or use something like Mastra Code, Open Code, something like that. There was some more hate on Anthropic. We talked last week about Palantir coming out and saying you need to not trust these frontier labs. They're with your data. They're launching competitors based on the data that they learned from you. And so this person from Comma AI said, Anthropic's a banned vendor, and got quite a bit of traction on this tweet where I think a lot of people were saying, that's dumb. But then a lot of people were agreeing. And then you got Yassine saying Anthropic is going to lose, to which Elon responds, winning was never in the set of possible outcomes for Anthropic. This was a long time ago, but it just so happened that it got resurfaced because of all the things that have been happening. It's like they went through this huge arc of success, and then now it's kind of like the ball is in their court, but I do think that they've kind of been fumbling a bit.
I think Elon came back to that tweet last week and said, despite what he said, he's not going to let them fail if it's because of compute and shit like that. So
Anthropic is too big to fail in the near term, right? Like Anthropic's not going away. They make great models. It's just the question of, are they going to be able to maintain their lead? And I think they are being so compute constrained, having all these this developer animosity that they're kind of building. I do question if they'll be able to hold on to it. Chinese model updates. China is considering restricting overseas access to its cutting-edge AI models. And I don't know how serious this is. It's hard to tell. But they've had meetings where they've talked with Alibaba, ByteDance, and others to discuss measures that would restrict overseas access. For those of you that are really big on open models, maybe this wouldn't be great for us. I don't know if it was just targeted at the US, but it kind of sounded like it from my reading of it. Z.ai is exploring custom AI chips. So as demand for GLM models starts to strain its compute supply, Abhi, you've said before that if you use GLM 5.2, it's pretty slow unless you use it with, like Alibaba Cloud or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just because of compute constraints. They're even way more compute constrained than Anthropic, of course. We saw the recent history of OpenAI making their own chips and Anthropic's starting to make their own chips as well, supposedly. So I think this is just the world we live in. MiniMax is building a 2.7 trillion parameter model called M3 Pro, which is 6 times its current flagship and the largest in China. The company will plan to open source it, with the release planned as early as Q3, potentially.
Same problem's going to happen, though. M3 is good. It's just slow as fuck. Yep. So why would I want to use it?
There's a lot of talk on software factories, and a lot of people are calling it like the company operating system or company OS. So first was the CTO of Uber said, agentic AI adoption is on fire at Uber, and it's changing the way we build, not just in engineering, but across the entire company. Today, 99% of our engineers use AI tools, and more than 70% of pull requests are attributed to local or cloud agents. But they essentially built this concept of agentic pods, where they send an AI engineer into another area of the organization to just work with that org to agentify as much of it as possible. And they kind of do these short sprints. Some people were joking. So basically they're using their own engineers as FDEs inside their organization, which I think is a kind of interesting way of putting it.
Yeah.
But overall, if you read the article, quite a bit of seems like positive ROI from the experiment so far. What do you think?
I think every company is struggling to figure out how they fit into this world. Bigger companies probably have had AI teams and engineers who are good, and they're trying to have adoption across the whole org. I think it makes so much sense to send your engineers to other teams to kind of FDE this success story. Whether how usable AI is or not, the people who have been working with it every day closely know what to do. So they're going to have to go in, train other teams, help people out, and then over time that knowledge will grow in all sectors of your business. So for sure, we have the same problem, right? Like we're thinking about things like that too. And we're small as fuck compared to Uber.
And this came out as well, which is kind of interesting. So everyone at Sierra uses an internal agent called Pinecone to automate 90% of our coding, analytics, and busy work. I can't go back to any other way of working. It essentially runs an agentic harness in their cloud, talks to all their tools, lets you pick any model, can spin up a local version, and is accessible, which I think is the important part, is accessible over mobile, Slack, GitHub, and web. So again, people trying to build their own factory of sorts, whether it's just for software, whether it's agentifying all their business processes. I think you're going to see this trend continue. I think it was kind of pioneered by Ramp and Stripe, specifically on coding, but it's not just for development. There's more support that harnesses can really help. Ali, Databricks' CEO, talks about how they basically benchmarked a bunch of different coding models with different harnesses and were able to see significant results with different harnesses. Again, this is before the model releases last week, so they don't have those in there. But you can see how using different harnesses actually impacted the scores of models. So you can get based on cost and pass rate. So you can see the trajectory of like GLM 5.2 with Pi is better than, I guess there isn't another GLM. Or you can use Opus 4.8 with Pi extra high. It was cheaper than if you use it in Claude Code. And I think that's what we've seen on the things that we've been doing, right, is the harness does matter. You shouldn't just assume that Claude Code is the best harness for Claude. I think that every benchmark we've seen has proven that's actually not the case. And the same goes with Codex and GPT. You shouldn't assume that it's the best. Like, it might be the best for a while, or it might be good, but it seems to be that the context engineering, the harness engineering does actually matter. Cognition introduced SWE-1.7, the most capable model we've trained yet. Kind of on that last trend. It says it scored within a few points of the strongest frontier models at a fraction of the cost and now is available at 1,000 tokens a second. RL is not hitting its limit. After refining our recipe, we keep seeing gains as we scale. This is not necessarily AI related at the surface, but it actually is. So Jared released a post about rewriting bun in Rust. It's a pretty detailed post. It talks about how all the loops were engineered to really rewrite bun in Rust relatively quickly, how if models didn't exist, this wouldn't have been possible. Years ago, you just wouldn't have done this. It would have taken like 2 or 3 engineers a year or something to rewrite the whole thing, and it was able to do it in a couple weeks. And so you could not have to worry about stopping new features and things like that.
I think it's when you are the product owner and stakeholder of your work, you can really design very, very good loops. And, Jared being the founder and probably the head engineer of Bun, designing those loops, figuring out, knowing all the intent and behavior of the application from the inception before AI to now. Those are some X factors here. You can't just, not all of us can go loop stuff. I guess, maybe you and I could, rewrite all of Mastra in Python if we were dumb. But we could probably do that because we know how Mastra works from the beginning.
I thought this was interesting post that came after. The bun rewrite to Rust would have cost about 165,000 in tokens if it was done over the API. Ooh. So that's a lot, right? Now, it didn't cost them $165,000 because he's at Anthropic. They have probably unlimited token budgets. He was just able to do it, but you'd have to really gauge that. Now, on the one hand, he said it would take multiple engineers a year to do it, so it's actually cheap, but it also, it wasn't necessarily cheap. $165,000 is a lot of money.
I think there's another concept from his blog post that's going to become more popular, which is this, not new, but it's this concept of adversarial review that happens in all your pull requests, where you get a different model that is, we call it internally like an asshole reviewer who is just super strict, the person you would never want to send a PR to because you're going to get your ass torn up. He built that into his process, and that helps.
Anyone who's worked on a team knows that person. Right? That person that not only it just picks apart everything, not only the fine details, not like the grammar nerd that just gets you oh, you missed a period in your comment, not that, but will point out any potential problem, even if it's not a problem that you have to really think about. And you'll have to then decide, well, should I just make this better to future-proof this or not?
Yeah.
And I think having that more adversarial review, which again should be probably a different model, but definitely a fresh context to give you that differing viewpoint that you can then respond to. I think that's going to be an important part. And maybe, multiple adversarial reviews from different models, right? Where, especially on high risk PRs, maybe for simple PRs, you don't need it. But for a high risk PR that changes a lot, you might want more than one review. If you have a big PR, there's oftentimes you might ask more than one person to review it, right?
Yeah.
If it's a critical PR that has major ramifications, I think we'll end up doing the same thing. As you design out software factories, you might say certain levels of complexity actually get 2 reviews from 2 different assholes with different opinions.
Exactly. More assholes, the better.
But the nice thing is you can have your agent that wrote it have to deal with the assholes for you.
Agents don't have feelings yet.
All right, so we got the quick hits. We're going to rocket fire through these quickly. TypeScript 7 officially was released, so if you're watching the show, you probably like TypeScript. Did you see this?
Yeah, dude.
Neo's hands. It's an API to the physical world. I'm sure most people know this. The hands are the hardest thing for robotics is to get neat. That's why you always see these robots with these clasps or these claws, right?
Yeah.
Because hands are actually there's no muscles, it's just tendons, and how you turn the tendons. It's a very sophisticated piece of machinery, right? And so this is the best robotic style hands I've ever seen.
Yeah, man.
So,
even in our YC batch, there were several people working on hands. And no offense to them, I think they got the hands to grab a hammer and, hit a nail, which is also very, impressive. I just thought that this was, next level.
Yeah, so I'd encourage you to watch it. It is cool. I think the hands are a huge unlock to robotics because the dexterity is what's important. It's the idea that I can, reach down and pick up something really small and do something with it with robotics, it's always been almost impossible to do. But if you can get even that remotely closer to human-like, you'll be able to automate a ton of tasks that weren't previously possible. Satya Nadella came out with a post on X. It says, the reverse information paradox. It reads very close to some of the ideas that Alex Karp was kind of talking about last week around what parts of the stack should you own. Satya kind of makes a case you should own your harness, you should own your evals, you should own your memory. And I'm paraphrasing a bit, so I'd encourage you to read it. But essentially, you should own which models you use. But then you should also be careful about owning the data that you're sending to the models, because you are sending potentially proprietary information and you don't know how that data is going to be used. And one day it could be used by those companies to train new models for their own use case to essentially automate or to try to compete directly with what you're doing, because you're basically providing training data for them. But you don't know how that data is going to be used, or you don't have access to how it's used. So I think the crux of this post is that there are certain parts you should probably control, and you should also be careful with how you use the data that you have. I think this is why open models are important. This is why I think owning your own inference is going to be important for some, or at least owning the data and knowing where that inference is happening, where that data lives. I think owning more of your orchestration, your memory, your evals, your company operating system, your software factory, whatever terms you want to use. I think that is the new parts of like your business that everyone has the like secret sauce of their company, right? Like how their company is run. Every company is run a little different. I think this is going to be a part of that. You can't just buy or grab something off the shelf and have every company run exactly the same. Ultimately, like your secret sauce is going to be how do you build the processes and use the tools to get yourself a competitive advantage against other companies doing similar things to what you're doing.
This is why we still believe in open source, why we'll continue to believe in open source. It's the only way.
Notion introduced ShipOS, the agent-native way to ship software. So you can run your entire product development cycle in Notion, from customer feedback to merged PR. Agents handle the triaging, routing, summarizing. Your team handles the judgment calls. So essentially, it's trying to be a bit more like an agentic linear right within Notion. Yeah. I saw some jokes on this post, like, Notion, aren't you just a note-taking app? And for us, it's like a company wiki, but they want to be more. Because that's already a powerful position, right? If you own a lot of the company's internal processes, the thought is maybe you can also own more of how things are shipped. And whatever that is, in this case, it's shipping code. But I could also imagine it being shipping other things, shipping blog posts, shipping marketing initiatives, things like that. I think they're at a disadvantage because I don't think people think of it as, like a development, but they're trying to get in the game. I saw this come out a couple days ago. So Sam Hogan says we're releasing Inference Autotune. So you can distill any frontier model into a 1 to 30 billion parameter task-specific SLM, so small language model with only 25 lines of code. And it can automatically route requests to reduce costs and latency by up to or greater than 90%. So it's about 2 hours and costs about $250 to train, and you own the weights. This could be really cool. If you've ever considered basically trying to train your own small language model, I think things like this will become more popular. And at $250 a pop, you can more easily retrain as you get more data, as things improve. I think that's always the question of, when you do these longer training or RL loops, is if you do it and then you get a whole bunch more data, you need to rerun it, and that's expensive, that's time consuming, it's complicated. There's a lot of teams trying to make this whole process of tuning or whether it's fine tuning, whether it's RLing these open source models into a small language model that is kind of purpose-built for a specific kind of task. What do you think?
It's the future. I think it's the future. I thought RL was going to have a bigger, it's not even just RL, it's just fine-tuning was going to have a bigger year than it's had. But I think with open models becoming more important, and then people trying to take ownership of their inference, we're going to see a lot of there's a lot of action in this space.
Yeah, I think it's been slower. And I think the reason it's been slower is because I think people have realized with context engineering and with the models continuing to get better, you can actually accomplish a lot, right? With just improved context, improved memory, you can get really far. And fine-tuning and RLing is always expensive, but there are a lot of companies trying to solve this problem. So I think the answer is you're going to need to do both. There are going to be some kind of tasks where you do the same thing over and over again, and actually you can just train a small model on your data, and it's not going to be that expensive. It's not going to be that hard. And you can retrain it relatively cheaply when you need to. And it'll do the task as well as Opus or Sonnet would, right? And you don't have to pay Opus or Sonnet API prices. You can pay, fractions of a penny for what would normally cost you a quarter.
As like AI sovereignty becomes more of a fad, this is going to happen like 100%.
I don't think it's here today yet. I mean, I thought it would be here by now a little bit more. 6 months ago, I thought we'd be starting to see it. I feel like it is slower on the uptake, but I do think it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. My guess now is it's going to be like 2027. This is going to become a real thing. That's the show. Make sure you are following us on X. Follow Mastra at Mastra. On YouTube, Mastra-AI. You can follow me on X at smthomas3. You can follow Abhi at Abhi Iyer. We're going to be, as we mentioned earlier, we're going to be in London next week for the TSAI Conf. Grab a virtual ticket if you're not in person, or if you're in London, come see us in person. We'll be there. But that's it for this show. We appreciate you all. Please give us that 5-star review. Please tell a friend, and we'll see you next week.
Happy token maxing. Peace.